Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. Kyle Bauer and the Real Ag crew bring you truthful, unbiased information about real agricultural concerns. From the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
We all know the image of a crop duster flying over a cornfield, but pesticide use is more complex than that. Pesticide is our topic tonight on Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
Before we get started, let's figure out what a pesticide is.
A pesticide is any material that can be applied or used to control anything that we don't want, any type of pest, which can range from insects to weeds to any organism that we don't want around.
And that pest can be anything from a cockroach to a weed to a fungus, any of those things that are doing what we don't want done, not accomplishing the task that we intend to live with, in some cases creating a disease.
Pesticides are used in agriculture because we want to produce, food and foodstuffs. If it wasn't for pesticides, we would not be able to produce the amount and the quality of food and foodstuffs, i.e. cotton, etc., that we need to feed this country and to feed the world.
If pesticides aren't used in today's agriculture, we could have several problems happen. Number one, the crop yields will go down. We'll see our yields be reduced because we aren't protecting the crop from competitive weeds, from insect damage, or from disease problems. We'll also have to see a lot more tillage being done. That costs our producers quite a bit more to actually till the soil and to work it numerous times in between crops to get it prepared for the next planting, which in the end will drive the prices of products up.
Pesticides are used regularly around the world. That's how we keep from having botulism in the restaurants. It's how we keep weeds that will carry diseases or stress the plant so it doesn't do as well. Basically, it affects our food source, and we eliminate the weed, eliminate the insect. It gives us a way to produce grain to feed the world.
We do a great job of utilizing pesticides in this state, in the state of Kansas, judiciously, carefully, so that we try to control just what we deem is our competitor, i.e. a pest, because the pests are competing with us for food and fiber or foodstuffs. Insects are our number one, our chief competitor for, like I said, for the products that we deem necessary. So it behooves us, it's imperative that we use pesticides if we want to feed the people in the state and the world on the level that we need to.
So pesticides come in different forms. The main ones that you're going to run into in agriculture are probably insecticides, which are used to control insects and some of their relatives. And then herbicides, which are used to control weeds, and then fungicides, which are sprayed to control different funguses that can attack plants.
It's actually under the umbrella of the term pesticide. We include things like insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, and antimicrobials, as defined by the Environmental Protection Agency. An antimicrobial product is a pesticide due to the fact that the pest that's being controlled is a bacteria, a virus, microorganism. And those type of products, things like your bathroom cleaners, kitchen cleaners, Those that claim antimicrobial, antibacterial properties are considered pesticides.
Many consumers are concerned about pesticides. Should they be?
I find that we have some consumers that are very concerned about pesticide use. The majority of the public we do not hear from, but we do have a group that are concerned. A lot of that is maybe sometimes just a general lack of communications. If you live out in the country and you have farmers around you, there will be pesticides applied on those farms. One of the things that we need to do is we need to communicate with each other. Talk about our concerns, when we might be doing a pesticide application. Could you possibly spray when the wind is in a certain direction to minimize any drift towards a property?
I think a lot of people are concerned about pesticide use because it kind of comes with a bad name. You think of a pesticide, you think of a toxin or a poison, and of course, you don't want to put that on your family's table. And I think a lot of people don't really acknowledge or are unaware of how much research goes into a pesticide, how carefully it is monitored, that when a pesticide is put on a crop, it's going to be so long before it comes to your table, and that the residues are not going to be present. So just because your corn was sprayed with a pesticide sometime during the season doesn't mean that you're putting a toxin on your table and feeding it to your family. So I think that misconception is probably the biggest fear that people have.
It's sometimes believed that we're kind of an enemy out to do whatever we want, but we eat the same produce as everyone else. We live in the same place, and I don't want my trees to die either. We're all in this business. The ecosystem includes us all, and we intend to be a part of it and a good steward of it.
The greatest source of information we have today is the internet. Unfortunately, the greatest source of misinformation we have today is also the internet. And if you're looking for a subject one way or another, there are always plenty of items that can be found on the internet. I would recommend, if you have questions, talk to your neighboring farmers, talk to the crop service centers in your area, call your local extension agent. They're the folks that are on the ground in your area doing the work.
Pesticides can be dangerous if used improperly.
First of all, most pesticides are somewhat dangerous. On the labels, there are different terms that are used to let people know how dangerous a pesticide is. And then they always give guidelines of what sort of safety materials you need to be wearing when you apply the pesticide, as well as how long it's safe to re-enter that area after the pesticide has been applied. So all pesticides are sort of inherently dangerous to humans. They're designed usually to kill different things. So it's very important to read a label and follow those instructions because they're there precisely to keep us safe.
Pesticides are designed by the companies that produce them to be used according to the labeled directions, and if they're used according to the labeled directions, should have minimal risk on people and the environment. When we start talking about the different categories of toxicity, we actually have 4 categories of toxicity. The category 1 is danger, and those are the products that have the most risk generally to the applicator associated with it. Category 2 would be warning, and categories 3 and 4 are caution. They're the lower end of the spectrum. A lot of times your category 1 products that are dangerous are also restricted use pesticides. Restricted use pesticide means that it can only be used by an applicator that has been certified to use it, whether that is a commercial applicator or a private farm applicator that's certified by the state of Kansas. A lot of people think of production agriculture and the products being used in agriculture, but we have a lot of pesticide use in town. That varies anywhere from our pest control products to keep pests out of our homes, termiticides to protect our structures, to the different products used to give us nice weed-free lawns and protect our ornamental plants from insects and diseases. Most of the products that are used in town are what we call general use pesticides. And a general use pesticide is one that a person that doesn't have certification can go out and buy. Like with all pesticides, it has directions for how to use it properly, and you know, the expectation is that the homeowner does use the product according to the pesticide label.
Pesticides come in a variety of forms. Each of them must be applied in a specific way.
Pesticides are delivered in many forms, and we're trying to do it in a more judicious way, or we're trying to be more careful so that it does not affect non-target organisms as much as possible.
In the pesticide world, we can't simply apply because we feel the need, or blanket apply is how I'll refer to that. We must be specific to what our applications are for, and the way we do that is we scout crops. Scouting meaning that I personally or someone with me, we walk this field, we go deal with the farmer, the man who's in charge of that field, and we'll have an arrangement ahead of time, because some of these timings, the application of these products are important, that we're there at the time that we have an insect problem, or just prior to, if a weed problem is going to come up, we need to have something applied on prior to a rain event, or maybe not to have it ahead of a rain event, so we don't have a runoff issue. So the scouting piece, where we're involved very specifically in observing that the ground prior to planting, maybe the ground after harvest, in between, we need to watch that. Same thing, change as depending on tillage practices and how that farmer's going to do his part of the job, and then we watch that. From that point on, we'll make a decision on what needs to happen in that field.
We've done a very good job, and the major insecticide companies have done a very good job of narrowing the spectrum of the pesticides, specifically insecticides, to the fact that now we still have some non-target kills, but for the most part, if we use them at the right time, timing is everything, and if we use the right product, we get a better kill of just the target and not so much effect on the non-target organisms. So, and there are various delivery systems. Some of the things that we have been working on is the use of bait systems mixed with a pesticide, so that it only attracts the target organism, the pest itself, and doesn't attract the non-target or the non-pest insects.
A lot of times they can be applied like at a planting time with machinery that sprays over a crop to foliar treat the plants, or even from airplanes, crop dusting and things like that.
The other form of application are the ground rigs, which are driven by our ag services. They're large wheeled vehicles with 100, 110-foot booms on them, and cover many, many acres a day. We don't have a lot of dry pesticide use in the agricultural market. More of our dry pesticides, maybe impregnated on a fertilizer product, are used in the turf and ornamental industry, such as our weed and feeds or our fertilizer and crabgrass preventers.
As you might expect, pesticides are tightly regulated by the government.
Pesticides are seriously regulated. In Kansas, the Kansas Department of Agriculture is the first line of regulation for the state of Kansas. And then going up the ladder, the federal government has the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency.
At the federal level, the federal government registers the pesticides, and all pesticide products have to be sent to the EPA along with the documentation for the testing that's been done, and the EPA will accept the label that's submitted by the registrants based on all of the data that goes with that product.
What you have working from the ground up, the insecticide companies discover a new compound with potential of killing a pest and not killing non-target organisms. So they will start developing that. They pass that around to their own folks. Every company, the Bayer, Syngenta, Monsantos, DuPonts of the world, They have their own section of regulators within that section that follows the EPA laws very closely on looking at their trials and making sure their products are going to conform so that eventually they can be registered by a state agency and the federal government. And they have to gather so much data to be registered or to be approved by the federal government.
I know here at Kansas State University, we work with a lot of companies. Once they've passed a pesticide, specifically we work with insecticides, through internal testing to make sure that it's relatively safe, kind of develop timelines of how long it is before you treat, before a consumer can eat the material, things like that. They will give the materials to us and we take it out in a field setting and test it for, not only its efficacy, but for safety from an environmental standpoint.
They want independent data, so the companies hire us to provide independent data also. And we submit that to the company. Then if it is a product that is going to be registered, if it looks like it has the potential of making the company a lot of money, they will go ahead and submit the data to the EPA. The EPA then will register that product. They'll notify the state, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, that this product is registered. The Department of Agriculture in Kansas then will decide the use in Kansas, if it's going to be registered or not. And conversely, if there's a product in Kansas that has been banned by the EPA, or if there's a product that they want to use differently than is on the federal label, the Kansas Department of Agriculture also has the ability to get a 24C, a special local needs registration, which we have done that in the last couple of years.
The pesticide and fertilizer program here at the Department of Agriculture is made up of a staff at the Topeka office. We also have 14 field inspectors that cover different geographical areas of the state.
The Food and Drug Administration, or in this case, Kansas Department of Agriculture, looks over our shoulder on this. We scout these reports written down, what we saw specifically, what insect, what pest, be it a weed or whatever fungus that we're after. We write that down, we document that we found that, we document that the plants at a given stage, and at this stage and at this time we should see an application. And then we'll choose a herbicide.
When we actually find problems in the field, whether that is from drift or misuse or not following labeled directions, we do an investigation of the use of that pesticide. Sometimes sampling is involved, sometimes checking of documents is involved. We'll build a complete case out of it, and when we review that case, we decide whether or not there was a violation of either state or federal law at that time. If it's a federal problem, we refer that on to the Environmental Protection Agency. If it's a state issue, we handle that in-house.
The whole system requires that I carry insurance so that I pay for, have the ability to pay for, before I ever go to the field, any damage I might cause or might be caused relative to whatever I applied or how I applied it.
If you're using a restricted use pesticide and it's not on your property and you don't have a commercial applicator license, there are criminal penalties involved. The Kansas Department of Agriculture at any time can come down, take a tank mix out of your tank that you're utilizing, take it in and have it analyzed to see what you're using. They can, fine you.
Some of the things that can happen based on misuse or improper record keeping would be an administrative warning letter, or what we also call a summary order, which is written that documents the violation of the law. We also send civil penalties out not to individuals, to companies that have violated the Kansas pesticide law. From there, we can move on to either suspending an individual's certification, or we can actually suspend or revoke a pesticide business license from a company. If it goes any farther than that, we occasionally will have to get either a district attorney or a county attorney involved if we have a real difficult situation.
Pesticides are not the only tool available to reduce pests.
So, we're talking about pesticides, but we really should probably be talking about management practices, because management practices have changed and have decreased the need for as many or the quantity of pesticides as well.
Pesticides are great tools. If used correctly, they're a great tool. It's like a chainsaw. A chainsaw is great cutting down limbs, but you can cut your finger off, you can cut your hand off if you're not careful. Exactly the same thing with the pesticide. They're great tools if used correctly, and we don't want to lose those. So I preach a lot about IPM, Integrated Pest Management, trying to use different methods of controlling pests, not just first think of using a pesticide, because the more we use these pesticides, the quicker we will develop resistance among our pests. And then once that happens, we've lost that tool in our toolbox, and we don't want to do that.
When talking about pesticides, we often hear about an insect or a weed developing a resistance. How does this come about?
Okay, when we talk about resistance, a lot of people don't understand exactly how that works. But resistance, it's not magic. What happens is most of our resistance is heritable. There's, as I said earlier, insects produce a lot of offspring. There's a lot of genetic variability out there. So most of the time, there will be one or two genes in one or two individual insects that allow that insect to detoxify an insecticide or make it so that it's not harmful to that one individual or two individuals. So you spray an insecticide, kills all the susceptible ones, but those one or two individuals survive. And then they reproduce, and they have that gene that allows all of their offspring to be resistant. So you've killed all of the competition, you've killed all of the others that were susceptible. So those two or three resistant ones are producing all resistant offspring, and those offspring produce resistant offspring, and there you go. Then we spray an insecticide, it doesn't kill them. The more you use insecticides, the more opportunity you have to find those resistant genes out there that will allow survivorship, which will kill all the susceptibles. Then you've just set the dinner table for them. All the resistant ones are there. There's no competition because insects compete against themselves also. There's so much variability, so much genetic variability in insects, we're going to have some resistance. And every insecticide that we've developed so far, we are seeing resistance to them. So it happens. That's why I'm saying you want to reduce the use of pesticides as much as possible, but use them if you need them.
Entomology is the study of insects and similar creatures.
All along the food chain, you have insects competing with us, and they're very good at competing with us for two reasons. Number one, they're very prolific. They produce a lot of offspring in a very short period of time, and number two, they're very persistent. Their livelihood depends upon them getting to our food source. So they are going to be very persistent at getting one individual or two individuals to be successful, and then they produce a lot of offspring, and so that's why I say they are number one competitors.
So we do have a lot of beneficial insects in a field, and these are insects that are doing good things for us. For example, lady beetles or ladybugs, I think we're all familiar with those. They play a huge role in not only our gardens, but also in field crops. They eat aphids, they feed on a lot of pest insect eggs. When you go through and spray a pesticide, for example, or an insecticide, you're going to kill those lady beetles along with everything else. So, your natural control, your beneficial insects are also being destroyed.
What is the future of pesticides?
The future of pesticides is a real interesting question. At one point, I thought maybe pesticides would be eliminated. That would be the goal of the public, if you will, or all of us. We've concluded as an industry, and even as the Kansas Department of Ag, as the Kansas Department of Agriculture, not just Kansas, but the United States Department of Agriculture, concluded that the pesticide isn't the enemy.
Pesticides are incredibly important, and if we lost them, I think we'd be in very big trouble. The amount of food we have to grow to support the world population today, if we didn't have pesticides, we'd lose, 40, 50, 70% of our crops to pests. And what would that leave for, humans to feed our cattle or to eat directly ourselves? So, I think pesticides tend to kind of get a negative connotation or a bad name, but without them, we'd really be in serious trouble.
I think the future's bright. In the last few years, the large agricultural chemical companies have done a really good job discovering newer products that are more specific, more efficacious, more effective at killing just the pests.
There you have it, a complex topic for a complex agricultural future. On behalf of the Real Ag crew, I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
The Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.